Syracuse's offensive line has one major change for this season.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, everyone. Jackson Holzer, Locked On Syracuse. On today's show, we are going over Syracuse football's special teams unit, and we are discussing the offensive line. All that and more coming up here on Locked On Syracuse. And for most of this show, it's going to be talking about the offensive line for Syracuse football. We'll go over the starters. We'll go over some of the key depth pieces. But before we even get to the personnel, there is one major change to this offensive line for Syracuse for 2026. And it actually has nothing to do with the personnel, but we have to acknowledge the new offensive line coach for Syracuse football. It's Juan Castillo. Juan Castillo has coached for over 40 years across all different levels of football, including the NFL and college. He has seen them all. He has coached them all. And the reason why I mentioned Juan Castillo and all the experience he has and how he's the new offensive line coach for Syracuse is because he is taking over an offensive line that really struggled this past season. And not only did they struggle in 2025, most of the starters and a lot of the backups for Syracuse were on the team last season. This was a unit that was bottom 5 in yards per carry in the ACC. They also gave up the third most sacks in the ACC. And I acknowledge that part of giving up sacks isn't necessarily on the offensive line. They can only hold up for so long. If the quarterback doesn't get rid of the football, then guess what? That sack is mostly on the quarterback, not offensive line, but the point still stands. They were poor with their run blocking, poor with their pass blocking, and if you're poor in both those categories, you're not exactly a good offensive lineman. And they made very little changes to the unit. Yes, the starters are going to look a little bit different, but most of the starters are guys that were backups for Syracuse last season. They did bring in 2 transfers, one of which is going to start for Syracuse in all likelihood. But still, this is an offensive line that while it's going to be different in terms of personnel, most of the players were on the roster last year. The hope is that with a new offensive line coach, with Juan Castillo and all the experience and the cachet that he brings to Syracuse, that he can elevate the current talent that is on Syracuse's offensive line. So with that said, let's go over the personnel, more specifically the starters for Syracuse football's offensive line. Keep in mind, this is subject to change as we are less than 2 weeks away from the start of the regular season, but this is the best intel I'm gathering based on everything out there online, credible reports. So likely starters, left tackle, Trevion Mack. Trevion Mack is a 6'6", 320-pound senior. Last season for Syracuse, he started 10 games, all of which were at left tackle. According to Pro Football Focus, he only allowed 1 sack in over 350 pass blocking attempts. That said, his overall Pro Football Focus grade was a 57.6 last year, which is not very good at all, but at least he showcased his talent from a pass blocking perspective. He's now a senior. He started a full year last season. He understands what it takes. And so you hope also with the new offensive line coach, like I mentioned, Trevion Mack can elevate his play. I'm not expecting him to be an all ACC player. I think best case scenario for Mack is that maybe he makes all ACC honorable mention, which I guess counts as all ACC, but I don't anticipate him being first team, second team, or third team when the season is over. Right tackle, Cam Pringle, 6'8", 325-pound junior, big guy, appeared in every game for Syracuse last season with 1 start. He played a total of 161 snaps for Syracuse a year ago at right tackle. He is a former 4-star recruit in the class of 2024. He went to South Carolina. He redshirted there for a season. Then he transferred to Syracuse in the offseason before the 2025 campaign. Obviously, he's got a great high school pedigree and he has taken incremental steps of being on the field. 2024, he's a redshirt for South Carolina. 2025, he's with Syracuse, mostly as a reserve, but still gets in there at times. He does make a start. Now he is entering year 3 of college football. This is really Cam Pringle's best chance to have a breakout caliber season for Syracuse. What would a breakout season look like for Cam Pringle? Well, for starters, it would be completing the entire season as the starting right tackle for Syracuse. That's number one, whether it's 12, 13, or possibly even more than 13 games for this upcoming season, right? Let's say Syracuse is really good and they play more than 13 games. That would be outstanding, obviously. But regardless, that's what it really is. Start every game for Syracuse, play at a decent level, not anticipating him being all conference. Maybe it's on the same track of Trevion Mack, where he gets a full year of starting and then he gets better in his second year of full starting. But this is likely going to be his first year full starting for Syracuse football. Maybe he can blossom into an all-conference player. I guess it's on the table, former 4-star recruit in high school, but I'm not putting that expectation on Cam Pringle. At center, you got Joe Cruz. Joe Cruz is 6'5", 320 pounds. He is a fifth year. He has been with Syracuse since 2022. He has appeared in 37 games with 16 starts for Syracuse football. And last year, he started all 12 games for Syracuse football, and he played 3 different positions. So this is a very versatile offensive lineman. The breakdown, exact snap counts, 482 snaps at right guard, 147 at center, 98 at left guard, and he did not allow a single sack last year and was also relatively disciplined with only 2 penalties last season. Like I mentioned with Joe Cruz, a really versatile offensive lineman, can play both guard spots, can play the center position as well. And when you look at Syracuse's offensive line and the depth that is on the roster, it makes sense that Joe Cruz is the starting center, because if it's not Joe Cruz, I'm not exactly sure who it would be for Syracuse. Well, I have an idea of who it would be for Syracuse, but the alternative I don't think is necessarily ready to start. Maybe it's Matthew Hahn, maybe it's Kahlil Stewart, who we'll get to later on in this show. But Joe Cruz appears to be the best option for Syracuse at center, even if he doesn't have the most experience as a starting center. If you recall, last year, Syracuse was in a similar boat where they got a guard transfer from Louisville by the name of Austin Collins, who graduated for this season, so he's not on the team anymore. But he was a guard. And they asked him to play center. And that's what he did last year. He wasn't exactly the greatest center in the world. I think it would have been better if he was a guard, but it's not like they had any better alternatives at center. Hopefully Joe Cruz can play at a higher level than what we saw from Austin Collins last season at center. Left guard. This is a transfer. This is a new guy for Syracuse. So let's learn a little bit about Oluwafontu Akinshilo, 6'5", 330-pound, sixth-year player from UCLA. He appeared in every game for the Bruins last season, but mainly as a special teams player. In fact, across his entire collegiate career, which I think he started in a JUCO level, then he went to Iowa State and was at UCLA the past couple of seasons. Akinshilo, I don't think, has ever started a game at the power conference level. That's definitely a concern. No doubt about that. I am concerned about him being a full-time starter if he has never started before. It's kind of interesting, but the optimistic way to look at it is he's never gotten the opportunity. And if he gets the opportunity, he will succeed. Of course, we don't know that to be true one way or another. But Akinshilo, at least from the reports from camp, appears to be the starting left guard for Syracuse football this upcoming season. I'm a little bit concerned by it, but you know what? It's his best shot. It's his opportunity. Let's see how he does. And then at right guard, I'm excited for this player. Byron Washington, a 6'7", 385-pound sophomore, 2025 Syracuse 3-star recruit. He appeared in 9 games for Syracuse last year with 3 starts. Keep in mind, he was a true freshman doing this. Played nearly 400 snaps for the Orange, which were mostly at right guard. Because he got on the field so quickly as an offensive lineman, and the fact that Syracuse heavily prioritized keeping him from leaving and going to the transfer portal. He is definitely a prime breakout candidate. He's really the only player on this offensive line that I view as having real all ACC potential. I'm not talking about being honorable mention, which, hey, if you're honorable mention all ACC, that's still impressive. That's still great. We'll certainly take that from any of these offensive linemen. But Byron Washington's really that one guy I look at and say, he could potentially be a first, second, or third team all ACC player. Still got to develop, obviously. It's not like he was a perfect offensive lineman last year. In fact, if you look at his Pro Football Focus grades, he wasn't particularly good, but he was a true freshman who got on the field pretty much immediately for Syracuse, which is really impressive as an offensive lineman to get on the field and play significantly as a true freshman. And the staff believes in him. They heavily prioritized keeping him from going to the transfer portal. So with all that said, Byron Washington is certainly someone that could break out for Syracuse this upcoming season along the offensive line and be an all-conference caliber player. So to recap what we just went over, this is what I project the starting offensive line to look like for Syracuse football. Again, keep in mind, this can obviously change, and we won't know for sure until we really get an official depth chart, if we even get an official depth chart from Syracuse. But I envision the left tackle being Trevion Mack. He was mostly the starter last year there for Syracuse. The right tackle being Cam Pringle. He transferred to Syracuse, was a backup, now seems to be elevated to a starting job. The center, Joe Cruz, got positional versatility, can play both guard spots, can play center. That's why I think he's going to ultimately end up being the starting center, because he's the best option at center. Left guard is UCLA transfer Oluwafantu Akinshilo. And then right guard, Byron Washington, who we just talked about. What do you make of the projected starting offensive line for Syracuse? And do you think that there will be any shakeups between now and opening day? Comment your thoughts right now in the comment section below. When we come back here on Locked On Syracuse, we will go over the depth of the offensive line, and we will also talk about Syracuse football's special teams, which in my opinion could be one of the strengths of the team. So we'll talk about that next on Locked On Syracuse. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. You got one app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place. Odoo is one platform to manage, grow, and scale your business. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working toward the same goal, and that's true in sports just like it is in business. And there was one recent move for Syracuse where everyone seemed aligned from the front office to the coaching staff to the players, and it really was a move that put Syracuse over the top in 2024. And, of course, I'm talking about Kyle McCord transferring to Syracuse from Ohio State. Fran Brown had a prior relationship with Kyle McCord. They had an opening at quarterback. Fran Brown was looking to make a splash as a first-time head coach with Syracuse football. It was a great move. Everyone was on the same page, and guess what? It led to a 10-win season for Syracuse in 2024. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. Jackson Holzer, Locked On Syracuse. Let's continue discussing this offensive line room, and later on we will get to the special teams unit and why I believe special teams could be one of the big strengths for Syracuse football in 2026. But first, let's continue talking about the offensive line, specifically the depth of this unit. It's almost always going to be the case with what I'm about to say. I am concerned about the depth of Syracuse football's offensive line. This is not just a Syracuse thing, by the way. This is pretty much every school around the country. Very few schools can go 2 deep, even potentially 3 deep along the offensive line before they start getting worried about the guys that they are playing. This is simply because there are very few quality offensive linemen around the nation. And when a team finds a quality offensive lineman, they try their absolute hardest to keep that player on the roster. We witnessed this with our own very two eyes with Syracuse football and what they did this offseason with Byron Washington. Byron Washington, a true freshman who got on the field right away, who we talked about in the first segment of this show. Syracuse made it a priority to keep Byron Washington from going to the transfer portal. You know why? Because they believe he can be a quality offensive lineman, and it's very difficult to find quality offensive linemen, especially in the transfer portal. So depth is a concern for Syracuse, but it's a concern almost everywhere around the nation. So I guess that kind of alleviates that slightly. Having said that, there are still some young players along this offensive line that maybe they're not starters now. Maybe they could be, but maybe they're not starters now, but could be future building blocks for Syracuse. You can certainly see some action this season. Number one, you got Kahlil Stewart. Kahlil Stewart is 6'4", 325-pound sophomore interior offensive lineman, a 2025 three-star recruit. I believe he can play both guard spots and center, so it's a versatile piece to keep an eye on for Syracuse in the future. You got Jayden Mann, 6'4", 330-pound sophomore tackle, also a 2025 three-star recruit. I believe he's still actually in contention to be one of the starters along the offensive line at tackle, so we'll see how that goes. And then you got Matthew Hahn, 6'6", 310-pound sophomore center, also a 2025 three-star recruit. Some, if not all of these young players that I just mentioned for Syracuse along the offensive line, they could see some action for this season and could be potential building blocks for Syracuse, potential starters for the Orange down the road, possibly the 2027, 2028 season, even 2029. Who knows by then, right? But those are just a few pieces to keep an eye on for Syracuse with the depth along the offensive line. Now let's transition to the special teams unit for Syracuse football. And it really could be one of the big strengths of the team. Now, just to tease our next episode here on Locked On Syracuse, we are going to go over the big strengths and weaknesses of the entire team for this upcoming season. But just a quick spoiler. Special teams is likely going to be a strength. There's a few reasons for this. Number one, they have a new special teams coordinator this upcoming season by the name of Alex Bayer, and Alex Bayer is actually Fran Brown's third special teams coordinator in 3 years. But Bayer was at Bowling Green the past 4 years as their special teams coach, and in 2024, he was a Broyles Award finalist, and that is given annually to the nation's top assistant coach. So clearly, this is someone who has a reputation of having really strong special teams rooms. And you also have to look at the personnel. It's not just a coaching thing with Syracuse and having a new new special teams coach, I should say, in Alex Bayer. It's also the personnel. The kicker for Syracuse should be good. Tripp Woody returns to the Orange. He was Syracuse's starting kicker last season. He connected on 12 of 14 field goal attempts. The long kick that he made last year was 49 yards, and he had room to spare with that kick, so you know he's got the leg to hit farther than that. But that 49-yarder, I remember that being a very big kick for Syracuse football. It was out of halftime against Clemson in week 4, and they had just hit a big play. It was Jonte Cook, I believe. It was a 50-yard gain to start the drive, and then the offense stalled out. They did not gain a single yard, I believe, after that big Jonte Cook connection. And it was the beginning of the second half. Syracuse was up by 10 points. They were in control of the game against Clemson, but if they had missed that kick, suddenly it's a 10-point game still. Clemson's feeling good because they just gave up a big play but didn't allow any points, and they're only down 10. That could have changed everything in that game. Clemson could have drove right down the field and cut it to a one-score game. But instead, Tripp Woody nails a 49-yarder out of halftime after that big rain delay. Or it wasn't a rain delay. It was a thunderstorm delay because they'll play in rain in football. This isn't baseball. They'll play in rain in football. But he nails the kick out of halftime, 49 yards. It puts Syracuse up 27-14. And obviously, they never look back in that game. Also, Tripp Woody went 22 of 22 on his extra points. So he figures to be one of the better kickers in the ACC, and he should be reliable. 12 of 14 last year is certainly nothing to sneeze at. That's about 86%. We'll certainly take that. And Tripp Woody can do the exact same thing for Syracuse, but that's just the kicker and the special teams coordinator for Syracuse. When we come back, we'll talk about the punter. And while it may not be the most glamorous position in the world, this guy could be pretty damn good for Syracuse this upcoming season. He's got pretty big shoes to fill. Jack Stonehouse was the punter last year, but still, this player that we're about to talk about, he could be one of the best players on the team relative to position. And we'll also talk about the number of players who could factor in as possible return men for Syracuse this upcoming season. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. And best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with everyday's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game is someone capable of going deep, and now you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch. And we all have certain factors that we look at when deciding our Daily Dingers picks. Sometimes you're looking at a player who's maybe been on a hot streak, a favorable pitching matchup, or even the ballpark. It could be a ballpark that tends to give up a lot of home runs. Those are always the first things I look at before making my Daily Dingers pick. So are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who is hitting a home run. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of MLB. Jackson Holzer, Locked On Syracuse. Let's continue discussing the special teams unit for Syracuse this upcoming season. Of course, they got a new special teams coordinator, Alex Baer, who is a Broyles Award finalist in 2024. You got your returning kicker, Tripp Woody. But now let's get to the punter. The punter for Syracuse, in all likelihood, is going to be Jimmy Gregg, and he's got pretty big shoes to fill, as I mentioned leading into this segment here. Jack Stonehouse was the punter for Syracuse the last few years, and he was actually Syracuse's lone representative on the All-ACC team last year. He was one of the better punters in the ACC, if not the entire country. But fortunately, Jimmy Gregg is pretty damn good in his own right, or at least projects to be pretty damn good. He comes in as the number one punter in the country on 24/7 Sports. Now, because he is a punter, he is only a 3-star recruit. He's the number one player at his position, but he is only a 3-star recruit. But again, he's the number one punter in the country coming to Syracuse. I know it's not glamorous, but here's a fact about Jimmy Gregg. He is the highest rated Syracuse commit relative to their position in the entire class of 2026, and that includes Talvin Russell. Yes, I know Jimmy Gregg is a punter. At the same time, he's got high expectations. He could be one of the best punters in the ACC almost immediately. I'm not saying I expect him in year one as a true freshman, just because he does have to adjust to be an all-conference punter, but that is certainly the expectation down the line when you come to Syracuse as the number one punter in the country. So again, he's taking over for a pretty damn good punter, Jack Stonehouse. But he should be pretty damn good in his own right, Jimmy Gregg. Now, returners. There are a lot of different candidates that Syracuse is looking at right now, from guys that project to be starters on the offense or defense to depth pieces that could see substantial playing time on special teams. Demetrius Samuel is certainly a candidate, although if he's going to be playing more offense as well this upcoming season, at some point in time, the guy is going to simply need a break. So I don't know if he's going to play too much special teams if he is playing a lot of offense as well. Potential starting nickel, Davian Kerr is in the mix. You got Matthew Outen, the Penn State transfer. He could be used on special teams. He's a Swiss Army knife. He was a 4-star wide receiver recruit out of high school. But he could also maybe factor in at running back. He could factor in at wide receiver, and maybe he can factor in as a return man for Syracuse as well. Juwan Johnson is in the mix, although if he's thriving at running back for Syracuse, I'm not sure we're going to want him on the field. for special teams purposes because, again, he needs rest. And also, you don't want him getting hurt on special teams when you know he's your starting running back. Ahmad Miller, the Jackson State transfer, is someone to keep an eye on as a potential return man. Backups like Davian Kerr, the running back, Siobhan Anderson Jr., and true freshman four-star Amari Goff are also potential players that could be return men for Syracuse this upcoming season. I look along this roster, and I don't necessarily see Devin Hester on it. And what I mean by that is there's no clear-cut guy you look at and say, that's the guy that's going to be designated to return all punts and all kicks throughout the entirety of the season. So I think what Bayer will do or should do or could do, however you want to phrase it really, is he's going to roll with the hot hand throughout the entire season. If you currently have 8 guys in the mix to potentially return kicks, then this is something where you might start with 1 or 2 guys, and if they perform well, you keep going. If not, you keep changing until you figure out a mix that ultimately works for returning kicks. So that's the special teams room. You got your kicker, Tripp Woody. You got your punter, Jimmy Gregg. You got the new special teams coordinator, Alex Bayer, with return games still being very much up in the air with a number of different candidates that Syracuse is looking at to take over those spots. Coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the near future, our next episode is going to be on Tuesday, August 25th. We have gone over every single position group for Syracuse football heading into the 2026 season, which is less than 2 weeks away, ladies and gentlemen. And so with that said, our next episode, we are going to go over the strengths and weaknesses for Syracuse football in 2026. All that and more coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the near future. Another potential podcast that I am looking at doing as well is projecting the big stat leaders for Syracuse football. Obviously, I think we know who's going to lead in passing yards, but who could lead in rushing? Who's going to lead in receiving? What are the over-under totals for Steve Angeli and other players along the team? All that and more coming up next on Locked On Syracuse in the near future. For now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow to reach all Syracuse Orange fans. Also, keeps you up to date with all the latest episodes. We will be giving a reaction episode to every single Syracuse football game and also basketball when that season rolls around. So definitely hit that subscribe button. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you all again soon.